Hey, I keep talking about microtasking in my videos, in my blog, and this is the way our company, Zerocracy, works. Our management is fundamentally based on the concept of microtasking in order to enable the fundamental principle of paying by result. And many of my listeners and readers and viewers who are not in Zerocracy yet, interested to know how we solve the main problem of microtasking, which is decomposition. So you guys keep asking me everywhere in YouTube comments, on my blog, sometimes by email, how do we break down a larger scope into smaller increments, into smaller tasks? It sounds like a great concept for you when there are thousands of microtasks and there are dozens of programmers in the project. Then you can easily delegate those large amount of tasks to those programmers, and they will contribute and they will close tasks, and we will pay them for results they deliver, and everything will be just great. But the question is, how do we decompose the larger piece into smaller elements? Where do we get those thousands of tasks? Who will do the decomposition? Who will do this, hard work of deciding what are the microtasks? How to define their smaller scopes? Because if the scope of a microtask is incorrectly defined, then the entire concept will just fall apart. It's not going to work, because if the scope of a microtask is vague, is not clear, it's difficult to understand what it is about, then nothing will work. So to decompose a larger piece into smaller elements is the core, the most important, the hardest work to do in the microtasking paradigm in general. And how do you do that? So who does that? There are a number of options which we tried before and which didn't work for us. The first one is to ask the software architect to decompose the large scope into smaller pieces. That is hard. This is almost impossible, because one person cannot do that much work. And it's difficult to do that up front. It's almost impossible to define what are the microtasks going to be when the project just starts. We just don't know how many of them will be there. We don't know what exactly are those microtasks will be when the project progresses, and the amount of code will grow, and something will change in the requirements. We just don't know what's going to happen in a month, so we cannot predict. We cannot draw an entire skeleton of the project together with all microtasks in the beginning. So it has to be done somehow in a progressive way, iteratively, sort of. And an architect may do that, but that will be the full-time job for the person, or maybe for a few people, just breaking down the scope into pieces. And it's not a fun work at all. So we tried that years ago, and it didn't look interesting for anyone. So no architect will be interested to do that. Another idea was that we need to ask the customer to do that, because the customer pays, the customer wants us to do the work. So let's ask the customer to give us those thousands of microtasks, and then we will implement them. But in that case, the customer has to be smarter than we are. The customer has to know all the technical details, has to know everything down to the single line of code in our code base, and it's not going to happen. We're not going to find that kind of customer. It's impossible. So we were thinking, years ago, when we started doing microtasking, we were thinking how to actually create the pool of tasks. So where can we get that tasks? Because once it's done, once the problem of decomposing is solved, everything else is just technical questions. We can create a robot who will delegate those tasks to programmers. We can make sure that programmers actually deliver them, and then we close and we pay and everything else. So the management of tasks, if they are properly defined, then the rest is just piece of cake to actually manage the army of programmers and the large pool of tasks. And we found an approach, a method, which I even filed a patent for USPTO like 6 years ago, so maybe even earlier. And it was called PuzzleDriven Development. PuzzleDriven Development. Here's how it works. And I explained it in a number of articles on the blog before, and I even have a webinar about that where I demonstrated technically how it works. But in a nutshell, just in a few minutes, here's how it works. Let's say you're a programmer, and you get a task which is called a microtask, but in reality it's way larger than the micro budget assigned to you. We assign half an hour. So let's say you're a programmer, your rate is for example, $50 an hour, and here comes the microtask to you, and it sounds like you have to make sure that the entire financial report is downloadable in a PDF format, and you have $25 to do that. Obviously, the size of this task is way bigger than just half an hour and then just $25. But you have to close it in $25, you have to close it in half an hour, that's how much you're gonna get. So we call it a microtask, but it's larger. Then we allow you as a programmer to resolve that problem, not entirely, but partially. We tell you that move forward a little bit in the implementation of this feature and make as much as you can within the scope of half an hour, and return us the code which is mergeable, which is clear, which is clean according to our static analysis, according to our unit testing, according to our integration testing, according to all the requirements which the build pipeline and the merge pipeline ask you to adhere to. And make sure it works. So make sure you don't break anything. That's the point. So here's the code for you, here's the code base, here's half an hour for you. Do something as much as you can and return back the code which works, doesn't break the entire system. And it does implement what you were asked for. It does download the PDF report of the entire financial situation of the system. But we allow you to leave certain parts of your functionality, of the code you implement, unimplemented, uncompleted, not yet completed, and mark them with markers. So leave the markers in the code and say that this feature doesn't work yet. The PDF is downloadable, but it's empty. It's just empty document, no data there. So put them and call them, we call them puzzles, those markers. And usually they start with to do. So you say to do later, and then explain what needs to be done later. So the document is there, but it's empty. The data is not there, but it has to be fetched from the database. The downloading works only for Chrome browser, but doesn't work for all other browsers. Has to be fixed later. So you do some step forward, a little one, because how much can you do in half an hour? And then you put the necessary markers in the code, which will tell us, your managers, what needs to be done after you finish your work. We get your code, we merge it into the code base, we validate that it's mergeable, we build everything, we deploy it to production maybe, we just close the contract with you. You walk away, we don't need your help anymore. We got what you need, what we needed from you. We got your code, we got your contribution, we made sure it's not breaking our product, and then we know what you told us. We know what are the next steps. So you helped us to break down a larger feature into smaller elements. You delivered us the first step, and then you gave us 5 next steps. So what you did for us, you did the code writing and you decomposed the task into smaller elements. So you helped us to do that job which we didn't know how to do, the job of decomposing the scope into smaller elements. So you became a micro-architect of a small feature. You got the feature, you were thinking about that feature, you made the decisions, the design, architecture decisions about that feature, you delivered it to us, we accepted your decisions. Of course, your contribution, your changes, your puzzles, which you put in the code, your design decision, was reviewed not only by unit test and static analyzer, but also by a code reviewer, maybe a number of reviewers, and the architect. So we agreed that the way you design that PDF downloading feature is done according to our architecture, according to our design standards. We accepted that. So in that way, in other words, the architect delegated you the work of breaking down the scope into sub-elements. You did that work, the architect accepted that, and now we have a more detailed description of our project in microtasks. And then all of the steps you defined there, all of the puzzles you left in the code, are automatically converted to new tasks, to new microtasks. And again, they are delegated to new programmers, but it doesn't mean that they are small enough to be implemented entirely within their micro budgets. Again, their implementers, the people who get those tasks, will make the decisions, the design decisions, how to break them down into smaller elements. And it goes down like that, deeper and deeper and deeper. So the project starts with just a few tasks, which are also micro tasks, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are in most cases defined by the customer or by the architect. And then they get delegated to programmers, and programmers start breaking them down into smaller pieces. And it goes like that with a large tree of tasks. It starts with the top and it goes down to the lowest level. It may take a week, may take a month, it may take a number of months until we get to the lower level. And then at the lowest level, we get really micro tasks, which can be technically implemented in just half an hour. They get implemented, and the entire work rolls back to the top, and the project gets assembled together. You may ask whether we can guarantee that those micro tasks which were created by programmers will actually be assembled together into a larger piece of code, and the code will actually work. But we see that it works because it's done incrementally, and every small micro task gets reviewed by the architect. All this decision of decomposition are being reviewed by multiple programmers and the architect itself. So that's how it works for us. We call it puzzle-driven development. You can try it yourself. We even created a few years ago a tool which automates this entire process. You can just add this tool to your GitHub project, open source or proprietary, doesn't matter. It works in both ways. It's free completely, so it will help you automate this process in GitHub. It will automatically pick up your puzzles from the code and create your GitHub tickets. So you don't need to do any manual work. All your programmers do, they just write code, they leave the puzzles where they think there's a good fit for them, and then the tool picks those puzzles up and creates new tasks. And when the puzzle disappears from the code, the tool removes the ticket from GitHub, closes the ticket, and says, okay, thanks, it's done, the puzzle is gone. And then the tool builds you the tree, builds you the full structure of all your puzzles in the code, demonstrating you where you are in terms of scope completeness. So try it out. It's not a rocket science, but it is quite helpful for our projects. We use that thing in all our projects we do in Zerocracy. This is the principle which our microtasking is based on. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.